My dear friend, I want to start today by asking you a simple question. What do you want? Not what you think you should want. Not what sounds spiritual enough to say out loud. What do you actually want? There is something sitting inside you right now. Maybe something you have been carrying for a long time. And I want us to sit with it today. I want to talk about desires, the way you would talk about them over a cup of tea with someone who actually cares about what is going on in your life. Because I think desires are one of the most misunderstood things in the Christian life. We treat them like they are suspicious. We treat them like wanting something deeply means we are being selfish or carnal. We sometimes feel like the moment we admit that we want something, we have to immediately follow it up with, but of course, whatever God wants. And I understand where that comes from. I understand the instinct to surrender. And I am not against surrender. But what I have learned over the years is that God and your desires are not always on opposite sides. Let me say that again slowly. God and your desires are not always on opposite sides. That shifted something for me when I really began to sit with it. I remember a season in my life when I kept telling myself that my desires were too big. I would pray and then immediately soften what I was asking for, like I was afraid to want too much from God. Like wanting too much was somehow ungrateful, and I carried that tension for years. I kept wanting certain things, not wild things, just real things, and I kept feeling guilty for wanting them. Then one day, I was sitting quietly in the morning, just being still, and something settled in me. It was just a quiet realization that God already knew what I wanted. He had always known. And I had been treating him like he was surprised by my desires, like I had to carefully explain them to him or justify them before he would consider them. But he already knew. That moment changed how I prayed. It changed how I approached God with the things I wanted. And it is what I want to walk you through today. Let us start at the beginning. A desire is not just a random thought that pops into your head. Desire is deep. It is the kind of thing that stays with you, even when you try to push it away. It is the thing you keep coming back to, even after you have tried to talk yourself out of it. You know what I mean. You tell yourself you do not really need it. You tell yourself there are people in worse situations who want more important things. You try to convince yourself it is not a big deal, and then a few months go by, and that same desire is still there. That is not coincidence. That kind of persistence tells you something. A passing whim does not stay. A craving does not last for years. What lasts, what keeps showing up no matter how many times you try to dismiss it, is telling you something important about who you are and what you were made for. Now, I am not saying every desire is holy or should be acted on without discernment. We are all human, and we all want things sometimes that are not good for us. I am not ignoring that. But I am talking about those deep, settled desires. The ones that come from somewhere inside you that feels real and consistent. The ones that are not just about pleasure or convenience, but about purpose, connection, and meaning. Those kinds of desires deserve to be taken seriously. I grew up in a faith environment where desire was treated a little like a problem. Not by anyone who was trying to cause harm. These were good people with good intentions. But the message, spoken or unspoken, was that the more spiritual you were, the less you would want for yourself. Like holiness meant emptying yourself of personal longing. And so I learned, from a young age, to keep my desires very quiet. I would feel things deeply, but I would not say them. I would hope for things, but I would not commit to hoping, if that makes sense. Because if I committed to the hope and it did not come through, I did not know how I would handle it. So I kept a kind of emotional distance from my own desires. I am sharing this because I have talked to enough people over the years to know I was not the only one who grew up that way. A lot of us were taught in one way or another that desire is dangerous, that wanting things makes you vulnerable, that the safest thing is to need as little as possible. But here is what I have found to be true. The safest thing is not the same as the right thing. Playing it safe with your desires does not protect you from disappointment. It just distances you from the life you are actually supposed to be living. Let me talk for a moment about the difference between a deep desire and a surface want. This distinction matters, and I think it is worth spending time on. A surface want is reactive. It comes and goes depending on what you are seeing around you, what someone else has, what season you are in emotionally. A deep desire is different. A deep desire is not really affected by what your neighbor is doing. It does not fluctuate based on your mood or the season. It is just there, quietly, like something that has always been part of you. And when you sit quietly enough to actually listen to yourself, you can usually tell the difference. The surface one feels like appetite. The deep desire feels more like a name you were given before you were old enough to understand it. That is the one I am talking about today. Let me tell you about how God sees your desires. I do not think He looks at the things you want and sees a problem to manage. I think He sees the fingerprints of the way He made you. Every person on this earth has been shaped in a very particular way. Not just physically, not just emotionally, but in terms of what they are drawn to, what they care about, what they cannot stop thinking about. That is not an accident. You were not put together randomly. The things that make you come alive, the things you care about when you are not performing for anyone, those things point to something. They point to how you were built, and a God who builds something with intention is also a God who cares about whether that thing is able to function the way it was designed to. That includes you. That includes your desires. I have a friend who spent almost a decade telling himself that the thing he deeply wanted was too much to ask for. He wanted a particular kind of work, not fame, not money, just meaningful work that felt connected to something larger than himself. He kept that desire at arm's length for years. He took jobs that were fine, but not it. He would come home at the end of the day feeling like something was missing, but he would also immediately feel ungrateful for feeling that way, because he had a job. He had enough. Who was he to want more? And then slowly, through a series of events, he did not engineer himself. Things began to shift. Not overnight, not in a dramatic way, but they shifted. And eventually he found himself in exactly the kind of work he had quietly been hoping for all along. He told me that one of the hardest parts was accepting that it was okay to have wanted it, that the desire itself was not the enemy, that it had actually been pointing him in the right direction the whole time. I think about his story a lot, when I feel that familiar tension between wanting something and feeling like I should not. Here is something I want you to really think about. Your desires are connected to your future. Not all of them, I know. Some of what we want is surface level. But the deep ones, the ones we have been talking about, those are connected to what is ahead of you. When you want something deeply enough that it stays with you through multiple seasons, through disappointments, through delays, through moments where you thought you had finally let go of it and then found it still sitting there, that desire is not just emotion, it is direction. It is your life trying to tell you something. And when you learn to take it seriously, you stop fighting yourself. Now I want to talk about something that I think is really important, and it is this. Why does God care about what you want? This is the question that a lot of people have, even if they never say it out loud. Because we have been taught that God cares about what He wants, and our job is to align with that. And I believe that is true. But alignment is not the same as erasure. God aligning your life with His purposes does not mean your personal desires have to disappear. Sometimes, and I have seen this more times than I can count, what God wants and what you want are the same thing. They were always the same thing. You just could not see it yet. The desire that felt like it was yours alone. The thing you were embarrassed to bring to God because it felt too personal, too small, too specific. That desire sometimes turns out to be exactly what He had been moving you toward all along. I cannot explain fully why it works this way, but I have watched it happen too many times to think it is a coincidence. There is something that happens when you stop hiding your desires, even from yourself. You become more honest, and honesty is a posture that God can work with. When you pretend you do not want what you want, You are not being more spiritual. You are just adding a layer of performance to your relationship with God. And I have found that performance creates distance. When I am honest, really honest, the kind where I sit quietly and just admit what is actually going on inside me, that is when I feel the most connection. Not because honesty earns anything, but because honesty is simply real. And what is real is what God actually meets you in. Let us talk for a moment about the fact that desires take time. This is the part that is the hardest for most of us, because we carry these desires for so long that eventually we start to wonder whether carrying them is even worth it. We start to wonder if we have misread something. We start to wonder if we were naive to believe that what we deeply wanted actually mattered to God. I have been in those moments. Most people who are honest with themselves have been there, and I do not want to rush past that. It is real. The waiting is real. The uncertainty is real. The tiredness that comes from wanting something for a long time is real. But I have also noticed something about that process. The desires that last through a long wait are the ones that are worth having. Not because endurance earns you anything, but because the very fact that a desire has survived disappointment, delay, and doubt tells you something about how deep it actually is. Surface desires do not survive all of that. Only the real ones do. I used to think that the right posture before God was always to hold things loosely, and I still believe in surrender. I genuinely do. But I have come to understand surrender differently than I used to. Surrender does not mean you stop caring about what you want. Surrender means you trust the person who holds what you want. There is a difference. One is detachment. The other is relationship. And I think God is far more interested in relationship than he is in detachment. Here is something practical that I have started doing, and I want to share it with you. I have started being very specific with God about what I want. Not, Lord, just do whatever you want with my life, and then secretly hoping he reads my mind. Actually specific. This is what I want. This is why I want it. This is how long I have been carrying it. And I have found that being specific changes something in me, not just in the asking, but in how I carry the desire afterward. When I put it into clear words, it stops being this amorphous, anxious weight and starts being something I have actually handed over. You cannot hand over something you have not named. There is also something I want to say about stewardship of a desire. We talk a lot about stewardship when it comes to money, to gifts, to time. But I do not think we talk enough about stewarding what we want. Stewardship of a desire means you do not let it turn into bitterness. It means you do not let the waiting make you resentful of people who seem to have what you want. It means you keep your relationship to the desire clean. You keep wanting it without letting the wanting corrode into something that poisons other areas of your life. I have had to actively tend to this in my own life. There were times when a desire I had been carrying for a long time started to leak into other areas in ways I did not initially recognize. I became quietly less generous with people who had what I was still waiting for. I became more closed in my general posture, and it took someone close to me pointing it out before I even realized it was happening. Stewarding a desire means staying open, staying generous, staying engaged with your actual life while you wait. It is active, not passive. Let me talk about another thing that I think we do not address enough, and that is the fear that comes with desiring. A lot of people are afraid to want things deeply because they have wanted things before and they did not get them, and that experience left a mark. It is not dramatic to name that. It is just honest. When you wanted something for a long time and it did not come through the way you expected, something in you got careful. Something in you learned to protect itself. And so now you approach desire differently. You approach it from a safer distance. You let yourself kind of want something, but not fully, because full wanting hurts when things do not work out. I understand that completely. And I am not here to tell you that you should have wanted harder or believed more. What I want to say is this: past disappointment does not determine future outcome. That is something I have had to actually believe and re-believe in my own life, in real situations, not theoretical ones. The door that did not open before does not mean the door is permanently closed. And the desire you laid down because you got tired of carrying it, that desire is not dead just because you set it down. I spoke recently with someone who had wanted the same thing for 12 years. 12 years. And she had gone through several cycles of hoping and then telling herself to stop hoping. She had done the work of trying to detach from it, of trying to redirect her energy, of trying to be content with where she was. And she was doing okay. She was genuinely doing okay. But the desire was still there. She had not manufactured it. She had not kept it alive out of stubbornness. It was just still there. And she asked me whether I thought that meant anything. I told her what I honestly believe, which is that desires that stay without you choosing to keep them are worth paying attention to. That they are not just noise. That there is something in the persistence of a real desire that is worth honoring, not dismissing. She is still waiting, but she is no longer dismissing the desire as naive. She is holding it with honesty, and I think that is the right posture. Here is what I want you to hear very clearly. God is not put off by your desires. He does not look at you wanting something specific and think, why can't they just be satisfied? He knows what it is to want. He knows what it is to care about something. He cares about things deeply and specifically, and he understands that you do too. The specific things you want, the details, the particulars, the things that would not mean much to someone else, but mean everything to you, those matter to him. Not because you can barter with desire, but because you matter to him, and what matters to you, therefore, matters to him. That is how relationship works. Let me talk about whether our desires are always good for us. I am not naive. I know that sometimes we want things that are not good for us. I have wanted things that were not good for me, and I have also seen that in time, a closed door in that direction turned out to be a mercy. So I am not saying every desire should be chased without discernment. What I am saying is that the desires we are talking about today, the ones that come from a real and settled place, the ones that are not rooted in comparison or ego, the ones that have persisted long enough to have been tested, those are the desires worth trusting. Not blindly, not without wisdom, but worth trusting. I want to spend some time on the connection between desire and identity, because I think that link is real. What you genuinely desire tells you something about who you genuinely are, not what you desire in a weak moment, not what you want when you are exhausted and reaching for comfort. I mean what you desire when you are at your best. When you are clear-headed and rested and honest with yourself, what is it you keep coming back to? What would your life look like if you stopped managing it for appearance and just let it be shaped by what you actually care about? I think for a lot of people, the answer to that question is closer to what God has in mind for them than they realize. The desire is not the obstacle. The desire might actually be the clue. Now I want to talk about how you carry a desire while you wait, because this is where so many people struggle. The in-between space, between when you first acknowledge a desire and when it actually comes to pass. That space is its own challenge. It is long sometimes. It is quiet sometimes. It is full of moments where you have to choose whether you are going to keep trusting or not. And I do not have a formula for that. What I have is experience. I have lived in that in-between space more than once. And what I can tell you is that what got me through was not willpower. It was not telling myself that everything was going to be fine. What got me through was continuing to show up honestly, continuing to bring the desire back to God, not because he forgot, but because the act of bringing it kept me connected. It kept me honest. It kept the desire alive in a healthy way, rather than letting it fester into bitterness or anxiety. The difference between a desire held in trust and a desire held in anxiety is not the desire itself. It is how you carry it. Let me say this to someone who might be watching today and who has been waiting for a very long time. I know the tiredness of long waiting. I know what it feels like when the desire you have been carrying starts to feel more like a burden than a hope. I know what it feels like to have explained it to God so many times that you feel like you are repeating yourself. You are not repeating yourself. Or rather, even if you are, that is okay. There is no quota on how many times you can bring something to God. There is no point at which He gets impatient with you for still wanting the same thing. Keep bringing it, not because repetition earns anything, but because bringing it keeps you honest. And honest is the best place to be. Here is something else I have observed over the years. The fulfillment of a desire rarely looks exactly like what you imagined when you first named the desire, and that used to frustrate me. But I have come to understand that is not because God missed the mark. It is because God sees more of the picture than we do when we first name what we want. You wanted the thing, He knew the full version of what that thing could become in your life. And sometimes the fulfillment is bigger, or different, or fuller than what you originally pictured. Not worse, just more. More than what you had the capacity to imagine when you were earlier in the journey. I want to shift gears a little and talk about what it looks like to actually receive the fulfillment of a desire. Because sometimes people do not recognize it when it comes, not because they are ungrateful, but because they expected it to arrive a certain way, and it arrived differently. I have had desires that I almost missed because the answer came in a form I was not watching for. I was looking in one direction, and the thing I had been wanting showed up from a completely different angle, and I have had to train myself to stay open, to hold the desire while staying flexible about the form it takes when it arrives. The form is not what matters. The substance is what matters. I also want to say something about gratitude in this context. Not the kind of gratitude that is performed, not the kind where you tell yourself you should be grateful so you better feel it. I mean the real kind. When a desire finally comes to pass, and I am speaking from experience here, there is a kind of gratitude that is almost overwhelming, not because the thing itself is always dramatic or spectacular, but because you remember the journey. You remember what it cost you to keep wanting something for so long. You remember the moments you almost gave up. And in that context, the fulfillment is not just a good thing that happened. It is evidence of something. Evidence that the waiting was real, but so was the coming through. Evidence that your desire was known and your desire mattered. That is a kind of gratitude that goes somewhere real. I want to say something else that I think is often overlooked. The process of carrying a desire over a long period of time does something to you. It shapes you, not in a way that you choose or that you would necessarily have chosen, but it shapes you all the same. There are things I understand about patience now that I did not understand in my 30s. There are things I understand about trust that I could only have learned by needing to trust. The waiting was not wasted time. It was time that was doing something in me, even when nothing seemed to be happening around me. I do not always enjoy saying that because it can sound like a way of glossing over how hard the waiting actually is. But I mean it genuinely. The person who comes out the other side of a long wait is not the same person who entered it. And that change, as uncomfortable as it is part of what gets you ready to receive what you have been waiting for. Let me bring some of this together now. If you are carrying a desire today, I want to encourage you to stop treating it like a problem. Stop trying to manage it out of existence. Stop feeling guilty for wanting what you want. Start treating your desire as information, as something that has something to say about who you are and where you are going. Start bringing it honestly to God, not as a transaction, not as a bargaining chip, but as the real and actual content of your inner life. He already knows. But there is something about you knowing that He knows and choosing to engage with Him honestly in it that changes the texture of the waiting. It changes how you carry it, and it keeps you connected in the waiting, rather than isolated in it. My beloved, I want to leave you with a quote today. It is from Frederick Buechner, a writer and theologian, and he said, "The place God calls you to is the place where your deep gladness and the world's deep hunger meet." I want you to sit with that for a moment. Your deep gladness is not frivolous. It is not a distraction from something more serious. The toner is saying that what brings you genuine, settled joy, not surface excitement, but the kind of quiet satisfaction you feel when something feels right, that thing is worth paying attention to, because where your deep gladness meets a real need in the world, that is where your life is meant to happen. That is where God is pointing you. So the desire you have been carrying, the thing that keeps returning to you, no matter how many times you try to set it down, it is very possibly connected to something the world around you actually needs. The desire is not just about you. It never really was. Before I close today, let me ask you something. What is the desire that you have been carrying the longest? I would love for you to share it in the comments below. I want to invite you to say this out loud with me right now in the comments section. Say, God, I trust you with my desires. Type it in the comments, because sometimes just naming it, even in that small way, is significant. And I want this community to be a space where you can do that. If today's teaching spoke to something in you, I want to ask you to please like and share this video. These teachings reach people who genuinely need them, and every time you share, you are helping this message find someone who might have been needing to hear exactly this. If you are new here, please subscribe so you do not miss what is coming. And if you have been here a while, thank you for continuing to show up. This community means more than I can properly express. Let me close us in prayer. Father, we come to you honestly. There are desires in this room right now. Desires that have been carried for months, for years, for longer than some of us want to admit. And we are bringing them to you today, not as a demand, but as an act of honesty. You know what we want. You knew before we sat down today. You knew before we found the words, and we are asking you in your goodness to move on behalf of what we have placed before you. For every person watching who has been waiting so long that hope has become difficult, God, we are asking you to renew what has grown tired, not to manufacture emotion, but to genuinely restore the kind of quiet trust that does not require drama to survive. For every person who has been afraid to want what they want, because past disappointment taught them to keep their distance, God, we are asking you to meet them in that place specifically, not generally, specifically. You are a God of details, and the details of each person's life are known to you. For every desire that has persisted without explanation, that has stayed through every season of discouragement, that has refused to be dismissed, no matter how hard the person tried, God, we believe those desires are not accidents. We believe they are telling us something, and we are trusting you with where they lead. For the person who has given up on naming what they want because they felt it was not safe to want anymore, God, restore the courage to want again. Restore the willingness to bring something real to you and leave it in your hands. For the one who is tired of praying the same prayer, remind them that you are not tired of hearing it. That consistency in coming to you is not nagging. It is faith. Fulfill what you have placed inside your people. Fulfill what they have been carrying in faith, in hope, and sometimes in plain, exhausted honesty. Do what only you can do, in the timing that is better than what we would have chosen, in the form that is fuller than what we imagined. Let the fulfillment of these desires be a testimony, not just to what happened, but to who you are. We trust you with this. We genuinely trust you, and we choose to keep trusting you, even on the days it is hard. In Jesus' name, amen.